All right, it must be a Wednesday if this man's joining us. The insanity that is this man to join us. Look out, Eugene, Springfield, the I-5 corridor. Our good buddy Tyson Alger joins us. Tyson, I'm going to open you up with this. I think I split my head open last night, and I might have a concussion, and I feel real stupid today. Do you ever have you ever had a concussion yourself?
Yeah, I've had a handful growing up playing hockey.
Handful?
Yeah, that's why I come on the show and say and lose my train of thought periodically. But
is that what I have? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I got my bell rung a few times, but fortunately it's been a while. But I feel for you, man.
Yeah, I definitely feel lost. I get warm, and I was wondering if I smelled toast earlier, but that I think is a different problem. We'll start here on this. We were just having this conversation. I know it's only been 2 weeks, and it's been against teams that barely have a pulse. But can you, after these 2 games, can expectations for the Ducks really change, or are you still kind of like where Danny is and just kind of still a wait and see?
Man, I think mine have changed, to be honest. I think I came on the show a few times and said, I wasn't willing to put a ceiling on where these Ducks would be this year because I knew there was a lot of talent in the room. But I just expected them, even in some of these early games, to just, show some growing pains, show some, getting used to each other, those sorts of things. But, through 2 games, and, yeah, I know the level of competition hasn't been good, but Oklahoma State's still a Power 4 opponent. They're a Big 12 team. They have a coach who's won a lot of football games, and I've never seen the Ducks embarrass somebody quite like that before, and it's with everybody on the roster. I mean, you can look up and down and see that there's 30-plus dudes who have recorded tackles in the first 2 games. There's more than 10 guys who have rushed. There's more than 10 guys who have caught balls. It's been just really kind of a highlight of, the wealth of talent that the Ducks have, and, it's you don't want to start making too big of inferences too soon, but we were sure ready to complain about why the offensive line didn't look good in the first 2 weeks of last season, or should we be worried that they only beat Idaho by 10? All those sorts of things. The level of competition was enough for us to start being worried about it. But yeah, I mean, just from cohesiveness, from the balance, from the fact that they haven't been recording penalties really either. This just looks like a really complete football team that is really in sync. And I just thought it would take some time for them to start putting together games like this. But they're 2-0. They've scored 120 plus points, and they're going into Northwestern, and I kind of expect them to do it again.
Yeah, let's go back to this Oklahoma State game. As you mentioned, Mike Gundy, a coach that's won a lot of games, massively respected. He's a man. Is your takeaway from that game, is the takeaway more that Oregon looks really good, or are we just really shocked at how bad Oklahoma State looked?
I mean, Oklahoma State looks pretty bad, but we also do have to consider that they were playing a guy making his first career start at quarterback, and as we saw last year, Austin can be a pretty tough place to play, even if you're a pretty experienced team like Ohio State coming in. So, I don't think Oklahoma State was necessarily set up to succeed in this game, but yeah, I mean, it's just we live in a world now where the talent discrepancy between a top 10 program and a program that's just kind of also in the league is significant. That's what the Ducks have been building for the last 4 years under Lanning. Really started under Cristobal, and it's just being able to have 1, 2, 3 waves of guys that can come at you. So I don't think it's all that shocking that Oregon did that to Oklahoma State, just because Oklahoma State isn't a team that's really been in the conversation really since, their mega booster passed. But, for them to put 69 points up against this wasn't an FCS team. This wasn't playing a team that has a built-in excuse. Yeah, Oregon has more money than Oklahoma State does, but Oklahoma State wants to say that it's playing at the same level, and the Ducks just destroyed them. So, I don't expect to see Oklahoma State's quarterback making its way to New York for the Heisman Trophy come December. But at the same time, this is the opponent that they played, and they dominated in every single facet of the game.
How much, or do you think there's any correlation between the two? You kind of alluded to it. Last year, the first 2 weeks, the offensive line play, shuffling around, back to center, health being kind of an issue versus the contrast of this year. Yes, you're flipping over basically your entire offensive line, but how much do you think the nature of not having issues kind of makes you project of like, oh, things are actually better because even with those issues last year, they go 13-0 and they win a Big Ten title.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like, they had a pretty decent season last year, despite all this saying the sky was falling after the first 2 weeks. Yeah, like the offensive line has really kind of been the key for me in all this. Like, they replaced 4 guys from it, but I think having Poncho back at center and just not having to kind of go through that, who's going to be responsible for calling plays out and hiking the ball and just like that chemistry with the quarterback, I think that's important. And then you just kind of look at the other guys that they have out there. We were talking with Emmanuel Pregnon yesterday, and like that guy's just a monster. And just the way they see that not only the lines blocking upfield, but we've seen wide receivers out there sealing off the edge. We've seen Kenyon Sadiq mauling dudes. Like, you really do just kind of see like a full buy-in from a team, which is fascinating to me, just because like they're so inexperienced and they're so new to having these starring roles. I'm writing about Peyton Woodward today and his pick 6 that he had. And, this is a kid who played 14 games last year, but most of them were on special teams. And all of a sudden he's a starter. He's starting to pose Dylan Thieneman, who's a Big Ten preseason All-American. You're having young and old kind of play at the same levels. And it's been really exciting to watch.
I'm going to bring in a question on my favorite Oregon Duck, and that is the big boy, Kenyon Sadiq. Was he going to throw a pass this weekend? Is he an emergency quarterback? Is that how insanely amazing this guy is?
I would not put anything athletically past that dude. You can put him in the Wildcat like they attempted to. I haven't seen him throw a ball, but in the words of old Uncle Rico, I bet he could throw it over those mountains if he ever had to. So I think Sadiq is such a unique athlete that Oregon has, because they've always had good gadget guys. Like, they've had speedsters, they've had like the DeAnthony Thomas types, but like, here's a guy that you can line up anywhere on the field and he's going to be the most physical and athletic guy no matter what position he's at. So maybe emergency quarterback Kenyon Sadiq in the future.
We did see that. I don't know if that was just kind of to take a look. Will we see more Wildcat options from this Dan Lanning team, or Will Stein, I should say?
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, just with the athleticism the athleticism Sadiq has. I mean, and this wasn't necessarily out of the Wildcat, but we've seen like DeCorian Moore come through on a couple end arounds, and boy, the way he turns the corner and just kind of shifts is awfully impressive. So yeah, they have a lot of variety that they can throw out of that backfield, which is, again, it's kind of impressive to see them not only trying this stuff out, but succeeding with a lot of it, considering just the youth on this roster and how early it is in the season. But they have some dudes who can play a lot of positions, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Will Stein, as the season goes on, to continue to kind of dive into that bag of tricks.
On that point, Tyson, Lanning talked about in the first couple of weeks about how they were going to be vanilla, keep it simple, but now it's time to kind of put some stuff really on tape and really try some things out. This feels like the 2-week ramp up period, right, for Penn State. And this, do you expect them to kind of go not necessarily deeper into the bag, but kind of hone things down as they start the prep to Beaver Stadium and the whiteout in Penn State?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like that balance of, you don't want to put too many things on Penn State for them to be able to prepare before, especially with the fact that Penn State has that bye going into the Oregon game in a couple of weeks. So I don't expect the Ducks to need to have to really push to beat Northwestern or Oregon State the week after that. But like, you do want to see proof of concept. You want to see things work on film. You want guys kind of just like having that confidence and experience of having run those things in game time situations and have them work. But I don't expect them to need to get super creative in these next couple games, but also, like, when you're scoring 69 points a game, like, you eventually have to go into that bag or you're just going to run out of stuff, guys. They've been so successful on offense. I think it's something to the tune of they've scored touchdowns on like 16 of 20 drives, which is just like an insane stat. And there's a couple field goals mixed in there, and also a kneel down to end the Montana State game. So it's just the efficiency of this offense has been fantastic, and it hasn't always been on like spectacular plays. Often it's just been get the ball to a guy with talent in space and watch everybody else block for him, which has been really, really impressive to watch.
We're chatting Oregon Ducks as we do every single Wednesday throughout the football season. We love you, Tyson. Thank you for joining us. Let's get back into it. I want to talk a little bit depth. We saw the running back situation in week 1. We saw it in week 2 as it's kind of this rotating carousel. All these guys are getting touches on the ball, but my question is more about overall depth. We've kind of talked about the big narrative nationally is, Alabama and Georgia can't hoard the 4 and 5 stars anymore because they've got 4 and 5 stars starting ahead of them. So everyone's depth has kind of lost it. How has Dan Lanning been able to kind of almost create the new way of depth, and how is he going to be able to sustain it?
Yeah, it's crazy because like here's the thing, like the Alabamas and Georgias in the world, like they still have 4 and 5 stars all over their rosters. It's just they don't have all of the 4 and 5 stars on their rosters. Like we've seen the kind of like a distribution, if you will, of some of the concentration from those teams that had a little bit of a monopoly on it. And Oregon's one of the teams that has taken the most advantage. I mean, if you look at like the blue chip ratio, which is the amount of players that you sign that are above 4-star or more, from 10 years ago when Oregon made the national championship in 2014, I believe that roster was around like 45% blue chip. This last class Oregon signed, I believe, was 99% blue chip guys. So they're getting a mass level of guys coming in. But then what's really impressive is, in Lanning's first couple seasons, you saw a fair amount of departures from the transfer portal, but they're just not really hemorrhaging guys anymore. And I think it's a mixture of, the Ducks have had some turnover just with graduations, and they've had to replace guys. So there's always kind of that carrot out in front of players of like, hey, you might have a starting position next year. But also it's Lanning's not really doing the smoke and mirrors thing when he says, like, if freshmen are good enough, like they're old enough. And so, like, if you look at Oregon's secondary right now, for instance, you have so many young players playing in there, whether it's Efi starting at corner or Peyton up at safety. It's just, there's a wide range of depth and opportunity and guys that they know if they come to Oregon, like they have a legitimate opportunity to come play. And it's not just kind of throwing fluff at them. Maybe the one position that hasn't been true at so far is quarterback, just because they've gone to the portal a few times and Dante Moore's technically a portal guy. But I just think that there's a impressive buy-in around here where guys don't really think that they're getting tricked into coming here and getting something that they weren't promised. I think that the Ducks are pretty upfront about it's going to be competitive. If you're not good enough, you're not going to get out on the field. But if you do get on the field, you're going to be part of a really good roster that has a lot of people looking at it, and you have the opportunity to really make an impact.
Do you think if he held a gun to Lanning's head that he would want them to not lose, but slip up and be in a game against Northwestern or against Oregon State ahead of that Penn State game and actually have some sort of tests, have them pushed to an extent as opposed to coming in and putting up another 50-plus points against Northwestern and Oregon State ahead of Penn State and just not really being tested going into a game into that atmosphere with a lot on the line?
Yeah, I mean, like there could be some benefit in that, but also like I'm pretty dang sure that even after outscoring opponents like 130-13 over the last 2 weeks, like I don't put it past Dan Lanning to throw on that tape and find a whole bunch of things that they weren't doing right. I think his quote after the first game is it's nice to find some adversity that doesn't hurt you in the end. And so, for them to be able to come out and execute and play to their level, like the one thing that they've kept saying throughout these blowout wins is we're playing against ourselves. Our gauge of progress and success is how much percentage of our players are doing the right thing out there. And so, yeah, like, if they came out and they had a tough 2 or 3 quarters against Northwestern, I'm sure that would give them a little bit more tape to dive into on that 3-hour flight home. But I imagine Lanning's going to be watching that film pretty regardless with a fine-tooth comb as they make their way back from Chicago.
I know you don't cover this team, but I got to ask you, if you you can either keep your reporter hat on, your journalist hat on, or take it off. What's your take on what's going on in Corvallis?
Oh, it's sad, man. Like it really is, and it's even tougher with kind of knowing what's coming next week with it being the last Civil War or the last scheduled Civil War and the discrepancy between the two teams. And boy, I can't really remember a time maybe since like the Gary Anderson era where they came out of a game or a loss or just had a performance where it just seemed like everyone was just so befuddled by what's happening. I mean, it's not only the way they lost that game, but then just kind of the discourse around it afterwards. I saw a lot of kind of the comments about, Oregon State's recruiting and how they've been treating in-state recruits and all those sorts of things. And like, they're just, it's a very tough position to be in for that school, and it's so unfortunate because we saw how good that they could get just even 2-3 years ago, back when they were part of a normal conference, and it's just I don't really know the path back to at least playing somewhat high level of football. Like I think eventually once the Pac-12 settles into what it is, like I think it'll be easier for them to kind of, deal with that conference and knowing what they have in it and just being able to kind of build around that. But for right now, it's just, I think last year there was a lot of kind of sympathy for them just because, this is what happened to Oregon State and it's not fair and it's all those things. But now I think we're really getting into kind of the depressing time for it, just because it's like it's real and it doesn't seem like it's a quick fix. And it's just unfortunate, guys, because this state is so much better when both of those teams are good, and it might be a while before we are able to say that again.
Pull the curtain back a little bit real quick, and if whether it's the stuff about Malik Murphy and NIL and what's confirmed and what's not confirmed, how do you cover something like that just from a journalist standpoint?
Man, it's so hard.
Just stay honest, I guess.
Yeah, but the NIL era is so tough because like you hear so many things from different people, and not only are you dealing with players and coaches, but you're dealing with people who are representing the school, and you're dealing with agents, and it's just kind of a mess. And like if a transfer works out great, like everyone's singing praises and saying that, hey, this is how it works. Here's proof of concept, but I just feel like we haven't had enough experience yet of the big name transfers who haven't worked out yet. And like, it's going to get messy at a lot of schools with these things. And, when you get into the NIL, and then now when we're talking about like the television rights distribution with like the house settlement, man, there are a lot of things to keep track of. There's a lot of kind of countering information that you get from a lot of different sources. So it's a complicated time to be covering a program where things aren't going right now.
I hesitate to even ask this because it's almost doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But like when you look at this Northwestern game, what box is left to tick for Oregon? Is there anything that you haven't seen? You're like, I want to see this in this game, because we've alluded to the depth, the production, everything has kind of been there. Is there anything left? Is there anything uncovered yet that you want, or anything that's buried you kind of want to see uncovered?
I guess if you were nitpicking after last game, you could look and see that, like, okay, Oklahoma State rushed for 141 yards, but then if you really look into it, most of those came in the fourth quarter. And that also came on the flip side of Oklahoma State passing for like 63 yards. So if you were to give me the options of the opposing team's going to pass for 63 yards and you're going to allow 141 yards rushing, like I'll take that. But I think just, continuing to show efficient tackling, especially at the second level and like the linebacker areas, the Ducks have lost a couple of receivers and kind of crossing routes and those sorts of things. So I think just a little bit of hemming it up on defense, but offensively, like I can't pick a single thing for them to work on right now, which I know isn't true. Like there's definitely things that are going to show up on tape, especially as they start playing some tougher teams. But like I can't sit here and be like, oh man, they need to do this better, because they've been pretty close to perfect here through the first 2 weeks.
He's Tyson Alger. Look out, Eugene, Springfield, I-5 corridor. What you writing this week?
I have a feature coming out tomorrow morning on Peyton Woodyard and just how he kind of ascended into a starting safety role. He's got a pretty interesting story. He's got 2 brothers and sisters who were D1 athletes. His parents were D1 athletes. He's kind of built for this sort of thing. So I write a little bit about his journey from Alabama to here. And then on Friday, we're kind of doing a deep dive into how the heck a team like Oregon prepares to travel so much, because Big Ten's coming right around the corner. They're going to be on the airplane a whole lot. What do players do with all those minutes that are spent traveling across the country? So that'll be coming out on Friday.
All right, check them out, and we'll circle back next week. Enjoy the game.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tyson.
That's Tyson Alger, the I-5 corridor. Look out, Eugene, Springfield. He joins us every single Wednesday throughout the Duck season to get his perspective on the situation.